is 13,231 votes ahead of Harris. That's with 2% of the estimated vote in from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In the state of Indiana, Donald Trump in the lead there as well, 71.8% to Kamala Harris's 26.8%. He's 1,604 votes in the lead. That's just a few votes there out of Indiana and Kentucky. Over to John King now. John, what are you watching for as these first actual votes come in from Indiana and Kentucky?
For the most part, Jake, it's just great to get started, right? We've been talking about this race for over a year now. Now we get to actually count actual votes. And you do, though, sometimes look, even in reliably red states like Indiana, did vote for Barack Obama in 2008, Kentucky, sometimes you can pick up certain things. The one thing I would look for in red states, and we don't have enough data yet, you see here, it's 1, 2, 3 counties right here, right, is are Republican voters turning out for Donald Trump, especially rural Republican voters. You can compare Trump 2016, Trump 2020, and then we will have more data on Trump 24 as we go through the night to just see. In 2020, he had more votes than 2016, still lost the election, but he had more. So what are you looking for out here? Number one, down here, you're in Laurel County, very rural territory. Donald Trump's going to get 80% all the time or more. The question is, okay, that's 33% of the vote there. This is what he needs in every state. Kentucky's a reliably red state, so we're not expecting a contest in Kentucky. But you take small counties like this, and they exist in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and Michigan, and Georgia, and North Carolina, and beyond, and you're just seeing, are people turning out? And so you can go back. This is early. That's 33% of the vote. But you can just go back and check it against prior elections. Too early to make that comparison now, but I just want to show you one way we can ask the question. Is Donald Trump overperforming or underperforming Donald Trump? Since he's the constant in this election, he's been on the ballot 3 elections in a row. So then you come back there. Let's come out of there and come back to 2024 and pop out. This one's a little bit more interesting when you come up here, Kenton County. Why? Because this is the Cincinnati suburbs. You see Cincinnati right there. The Cincinnati airport is actually here in Covington, Kentucky, across the bridge right there. Sorry, I just touched that by accident. Let's come back to it here. And so you bring out the county here, and you see Donald Trump running, again, 40% of the vote, 43% of the vote there. Donald Trump getting 59%. So you just want to go back in time in an area that is more rural as you get down here, but quite suburban up here. Let's just take a look. 59% now, 59% last time. So Donald Trump at the moment, we're not done with the count there, but at the moment, Donald Trump is tracking Donald Trump 2020. Let's take a look at 2016, and you come look at 2016, Donald Trump gets 60, if you would round that up there in 2016, and at the moment, he's getting 59. So he's essentially tracking where he was in a state that he won comfortably. Again, might be a useless exercise as you get through the night, but sometimes you're just looking, how is Donald Trump doing compared to Donald Trump in past elections in the red states? And again, so far, when you look here in Indiana, it's the same question. We're not in any of the giant voting areas yet. You just take a peek here, 2024, Donald Trump getting 62%. You just go back to check, Donald Trump getting 73% there. So again, I want to see what percentage of the vote we have here. Yeah, we're at 39%. So just something to keep an eye on, right? And is it going to matter in Indiana? Probably not. But if Donald Trump's turnout or margins are down a little bit in these other places, Jake, sometimes you can take one state and then find a community county like it in a battleground state and start to do a little bit more analysis. Right now it's early, and we're just kind of looking for curiosity purposes.
All right, fascinating stuff with the first actual votes coming in. Aaron Burnett is helming our Battleground State Command Center. Aaron.
I like how you call it the command center. And as, of course, we're getting some of those early results in as John is going through, Jake is going through, we are also watching the vote come in, and people still at polling stations. Macomb Township, Michigan, outside of Detroit, is where Jim Sciutto has been. I saw you a moment ago as we were getting ready to come to you, speaking to a young voter there, Jim. What are you seeing as people are still voting there?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, Macomb County went for Trump in the last cycle. Big question this cycle is, does Trump maintain the support he saw last time? But interestingly, we just met a voter. I'm going to introduce you to him now, Jimmy Fan, who voted for Biden last cycle in 2020. But he told us just a short time ago he's voting for Trump this cycle. Jimmy Fan, he's a small business owner, father of 3, and soon to be 4 next week, as I found out. But Jimmy, tell me, what was your deciding factor in this election?
I was thinking Trump would be a better choice on this elections. He would run for when he run the office. I think he will get a lot of stuff down, like when he was a president. The economy and stuff. That what we were aiming for this elections, more than just more than just just vote for somebody. So that what me and my wife just vote on.
You said the economy was stronger for you as a business owner when Trump was president than during the last 4 years of Biden.
That is correct. Yeah, Yeah, I feel like that's what I feel like. You know, even though with a lot of stimulus, a lot of that stuff coming through, but I feel like business would run a lot better when Trump was the president. But you know, when he's if he win this time, I think we would get to that ladder. You know.
Question: some voters you hear they wonder whether their vote will count. Do you have faith in the voting system here in Michigan that your vote will count and the votes will be counted fairly?
I mean, in this Macomb system, I think is legit. Yeah, but I feel last time was robbed it. You know, a little bit.
You have a question about the 2020 election.
Yes. Because I looked at the like the poll. It was was dominant one day and then another day it just flipped upside down. So.
Well, as we know, there was no evidence found of flipping then. But in this election, you're confident your vote will count. Jimmy Fan and his family, congratulations on the baby-to-be. Thanks so much for joining. Of course, the big question looking forward, will there be more voters like him and what that'll mean for the state of Michigan?
Right, and of course, what he just said to you, Jim, is so important. When he said, all right, he didn't really have faith last time, but this time in his specific voting area, he has confidence in the system and in his vote, and that's what's important. That's what we want to hear. Let's go to Sarah Seidner. She's in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, just outside Milwaukee. Sarah, now it looks like, I don't know if this is the after-work crowd that you're seeing, but it does look like it is quite busy right now.
It is, and it's been getting busier. And as you mentioned, 5 o'clock hit, and we started seeing another run of people. It's been sort of trickling all day. It was lots of people in the morning, and now we're starting to get a lot more people in the evening. I do want to bring in quickly the Fellows Lease family. What we have been seeing that is so lovely here in Cedarburg is that entire families are showing up, voting separately, but together. Please tell me, what was your big issue? Was there one or two that you showed up for?
I think honesty and integrity would be two really important factors in the candidates.
And as for you?
Yeah, I would go with that. I think honesty, integrity, and plans for the future, a forward-looking candidate is what I was looking for.
Would you mind sharing with me who you voted for and why?
I voted for Kamala Harris, and I'm super proud to the idea of the first ever woman being in the seat of the presidency is remarkable, and it's so exciting, and I think it's really important having daughters. We have another daughter that's home tonight, but these two to see this process and just know that there's no limits to what they can do in their lives.
And as for you?
I'm so excited for these girls to see this election with a female on the ballot and to have that opportunity for leadership from a female perspective. I think it's awesome.
I noticed that you did this lovely thing where they were showing you the ballots and sort of how it was working. I heard you guys talking back and forth. And it was just wonderful to see families teaching and also learning about this really important process that we all should be taking part in. And Cedarburg, as we understand it, may have up to 95% of the voters come in to vote, which is an incredibly high number. So thank you so much for doing your civic duty and coming in today. As the whole family, I love it. It's wonderful. Appreciate it. That's a scene here in Cedarburg, a picturesque town with a very big family feel.
Yes, absolutely. And interesting what they were telling you, Sarah, honesty and integrity, just that feeling from that family. And then we had just heard from Jim with the voter he was speaking to in Michigan, where that voter was going for Trump. And that was based on economic issues, which we've heard from other voters who have spoken to some of our reporters in battleground states across the country who have chosen to go for Trump. So we'll see what it all means. Thanks very much to you, Sarah and Anderson. That's the most fascinating part of this, is hearing from these individual voters and their different reasons for making the choice they did.
Yeah, and the potential turnout in that county incredibly high. David Chalian has been looking at exit poll data over the last hour or so. He's got some new numbers. David, you have some new numbers on voters' views of the candidates.
Yeah, it's sort of a basic popularity measure that we look at, Anderson. You have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the candidate. So do you have a favorable opinion of the candidates? Is this one here? 46% of voters across the country in this election say only a favorable opinion of Harris. 42% say they have a favorable opinion only of Donald Trump. 2% say both Harris and Trump they have a favorable opinion on. And interestingly, 8% say they don't have a favorable opinion of neither. That's a bit higher. When we asked this 4 years ago, it was only 3% who said neither to Biden and Trump 4 years ago, though it's not as high of the folks who said neither 8 years ago when it was Clinton Trump in 2016. Who is too extreme? 36% of Americans nationwide voting in this election tell us only Harris is too extreme. 47%, nearly half, say only Trump is too extreme. 8% say both, 5% say neither. What is your feeling if Donald Trump is elected president? So 22% excited, 26% optimistic, 48%, nearly half say excited or optimistic, 14% concerned, and the plurality, 36%, say they are scared if Trump is elected president. You see there the bottom two add up to 50%. We asked the same thing about Harris. What are your feelings if Harris is elected president? You see 49% are excited or optimistic, 20% are concerned, and she has a lower number, 28%, who say they'd be scared. But again, splitting roughly in half between excited and optimistic and concerned or scared if Harris is elected president, Anderson.
All right, we'll keep looking at these exit polls as sometimes frustrating or Rorschach test-like they are. We're tracking the first presidential votes of the night from Kentucky and Indiana, and we're closing in on the first major round of poll closings, including the high-stakes battleground of Georgia. Stay right here for real-time results. That's all ahead.
And we're back. We have another key race alert for you. More votes coming in from the states of Indiana and Kentucky. In Indiana, Donald Trump is in the lead, 62.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 36.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 43,417 vote lead. That's with an estimated 5% of the vote in. In the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Donald Trump in the lead there as well, with 65.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 32.9% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 17,717 vote lead. That's with an estimated 3% of the vote. Over to John King. John, what stands out to you as these first votes come in?
One thing that stands out is that both states are getting about their business in the sense that we're wondering, will the battlegrounds count slowly or quickly? We're starting to see results trickle in. Kentucky's only at 3% right now, but you see more counties have at least reported some votes than the last time we were here. So what am I looking at? One thing, it's way too early. I just want to show you, we expect Donald Trump, of course, to win the state of Kentucky. It's been a red state for quite some time. But there are blue pockets, and so you try to see in an urban area that has key suburbs around it, this is Lexington, Fayette County, how is the vice president performing compared to Joe Biden 4 years ago or Hillary Clinton 4 years before that? It's way too early. You see 373 votes to 199 votes, so I'm not even going to do the comparison, but this is one of the things you look at and you say, okay, and so where is there a community like this in a battleground state, right? Because we tend to have nationalized elections. Too soon for that. In 2016, if you were with us back in 2016, one of the very first clues of the Trump phenomenon came here. Came right here. In the early results out of Kentucky, we saw in these small rural counties, not only was Donald Trump running it up, but running it up in excess of Mitt Romney, running it up in excess of George W. Bush, getting new people to come out and vote Republican. That's what made Donald Trump the force he was in 2016. And so we're going to look along these lines just to see, again, we expect him to win Kentucky. So some people might say, why do we care? Why do we want to look at that? Well, as you see, that's Ohio, right? And then there are Wisconsin and Michigan. There are communities like that in some of the other battleground states as well. So you're trying to see what's happening. So we'll just take a peek here to see. There are 25% here in Greenup County, Donald Trump at 72%, right? So you just go back and look. Is the rural Trump base coming out like they did in 2016 out of the woodwork? So there's 2024. He's at 72%. In 2020, he's at 72%, so he's about matching 2020. You just go back to 2016 and look, there he was at 71%. So essentially consistent turnout for Donald Trump in the small rural counties that are critical to him. Now, we're not done here, obviously. That was only about 25%, I think, when we did it. But you want to look at that throughout the night. That first glance says, okay, the people we expect to come out for Trump are coming out there. I mentioned earlier, let me get rid of the green. Here's one of the places we will look at because it is more interesting in the sense of more competitive. You have Cincinnati right here, Covington, Kentucky right here. For those of you familiar with the area, if you land in Cincinnati Airport, that's actually here in Kentucky. You drive across the bridge into Ohio. There's some suburban areas here, some hotels, some restaurant development, some young people live here. So it tends to be a little bit more competitive. It's still Republican. We're up to 43%, 59% for Trump 2024, 59% for Trump 2020, 59%, 60% if you round up for 2016. So again, in the two counties we looked at, and it's pretty early, Donald Trump is running like Donald Trump. And so he's winning the red states by about those numbers, winning those small communities by about those numbers. So now we look up into Indiana. All red at the moment. Let's just go back to 2020 and look. There will be some blue pockets, Bloomington, Indianapolis, Gary, Indiana, South Bend, Indiana. We don't have votes there yet. Again, a place to look. Are African Americans turning out in Gary and South Bend, for example, and down in Indianapolis as well? How's the vice president doing in the suburbs? We will get that a little bit later. What are we getting right now about Donald Trump? Let's just look here. Allen County is Fort Wayne, Indiana. So 52% in 2024 right now, about 44%. So it's a fair comparison. We'll see if it changes. 54%, 55 if you round that up, and 58% there, 57% there if you don't round it up. So down a little bit in the early results so far from 2016. Is there anything to make of that, Jake? I'd be very careful about that with only 44%. But it's one of the things you look at in the counties, especially as the suburbs start to expand in places like this. Is Donald Trump close to where he was in 2020, closer to 2016, or is he bringing out new voters in 2024, Anderson? Early in the night, you're just looking for clues.
Yeah, John, we'll continue to check in with you back with the team here in New York. Scott, obviously you're from Kentucky. Where will you be looking over the next hour or two in terms of kind of a litmus test?
Yeah, Eastern time zone, so the state's bifurcated right down the middle. And so all the county results we have now are in the east. The two big counties, Jefferson and Fayette, are the two Democratic counties. So obviously we'll be looking to see overall Democratic enthusiasm there. But if you're looking to see where Trump, if he's having any trouble in the white college-educated suburbs, it would be in Boone, Kenton, and Campbell, which are the three counties in greater Cincinnati. you would detect it there. Now, in the early returns John just showed us, we're not picking up any of that right now. It doesn't look like we're seeing any flight from Trump. Still more votes to count. One other issue, all of Eastern Kentucky, that's Appalachia. If rural turnout goes gangbusters out there and people are, beating down the doors to vote out in East Kentucky, that might also tell me something about what rural areas in Pennsylvania and other swing states may do.
Just talking about Pennsylvania, it seems like, I think Trump has been already kind of laying the groundwork about alleging voter fraud, which there's no evidence of in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think he's been doing that for several weeks. He's been conditioning audiences and telling them
tweeting about it tonight.
Yeah. No, I know he's tweeting about it tonight. And look, I think that is they have a strategy post-election for this. We'll see how it turns out. It may be the election. It could go his way. Maybe it'll swing her way in a bigger way that will be more decisive. But this is, I've said many times, my concern about Donald Trump has less to do with issues, though I disagree with him deeply. But his political project requires him to tear down faith in institutions and rules and laws, and even the most fundamental thing, which is elections.
The fact that he's doing that tonight, Alyssa, does that tell you that he's worried about what they're seeing?
It's a mixed bag, because in 2016, even when he won, he claimed that there was massive fraud. He stood up this election integrity commission within the White House that then he folded because it found no widespread fraud. So this is something baked into his DNA. But the clip at which he's doing it, the way he's doing it, targeting Pennsylvania, I think that they're nervous. I think that his behavior in the final stretch of it, I think they recognize their closing message was nowhere where it needed to be. And some of the early projections we're seeing show a momentum that I think a lot of Americans are feeling, that this Trump era may be coming to an end.
Look, he should be scared in Pennsylvania because there is an energy, there is a surge. Look, you talked to me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I'm chewing my fingernails down to my elbows. I'm just worried. The Puerto Rican vote by itself has been lit on fire. Now, people will tell you, different things about it, but what I'm hearing, I talked to a young woman named Camille Rivera. She's with La Brega y Fuerza. It's the only Puerto Rican PAC. They were begging for money. Nobody cared about them, but they had built the only voter file for Puerto Ricans. When this insult comment attacked Puerto Rico, she said it was like wildfire. She said people remember, Puerto Ricans culturally, they vote a lot. They vote a lot on the island. And so there is a big tidal wave of Puerto Rican vote coming in Pennsylvania.
Could turn out to be the most expensive joke in history.
On the issue of Pennsylvania, I talked to the Trump campaign just a couple of minutes ago. They actually have Trump sitting in a room right now calling into radio stations in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, encouraging last-minute turnout. I asked my source there, how you feeling? And he said, would rather be us than them, but it's tight.
All right, we are nearing the first major round of results in the presidential race. After 7 p.m. Eastern, it is a jam-packed hour ahead as voting ends in the battleground state of Georgia. We're also waiting votes from all the swing states that will decide the presidential election. We'll be right back.
And we're standing by for the first big round of poll closing coming up at the top of the hour. But right now, more early votes are coming in. We have a key race alert. Let's take a look at the actual votes here from Indiana. Donald Trump in the lead, 58.1% of the vote. Kamala Harris in second place, 40.6% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 53,428 vote lead. That's with 10% of the estimated vote in from the state of Indiana. On to Commonwealth Kentucky, Donald Trump in the lead there, 66.4% of the vote. Kamala Harris in second there with 32.4% of the vote. Donald Trump up there. His lead is 31,523 votes. That's with 4% of the estimated vote in. We're about to get our first chance to make projections in this historic race for the White House. We're counting down to the top of the hour when voting ends in 6 states, and a total of 60 electoral votes are up for grabs. Remember, it takes 270 electoral votes to win the election. All polling places are scheduled to close just minutes from now in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're closely watching Georgia. That is the first of 7 high-stakes presidential battlegrounds on the line tonight. Kamala Harris trying hard to make Georgia stay blue after President Biden flipped it 4 years ago. Donald Trump, of course, eager to win Georgia back. That's, of course, a state where he has been criminally charged with trying to overturn his 2020 election loss in that state. Let's check in with our campaign correspondents now. First, Abby Phillip at Harris Campaign Headquarters here in Washington, D.C. Abby, as we stand by waiting for the vote to close in Georgia, what's the latest you're hearing from the campaign?
Well, Jake, they are watching very closely what has been happening throughout the day, and it's seemingly increasingly as we get toward that poll closing deadline at the top of the hour, which is that there have been bomb threats being called in to polling places throughout the state of Georgia, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Cobb County, and others. These threats are non-credible. They are not believed to be credible, but they are being investigated. And as a result, some of these polling places maybe temporarily were closed, voters turned away. I was speaking to a senior Democrat down there in Georgia, watching this very carefully, saying they are hoping that voters will come back. Anyone who might have been scared away in those periods of time will come back and will cast their ballots. Some of those polling places also, Jake, are being kept open a little bit after the top of the hour. So this is an ongoing situation that they are watching very closely because of where this is happening. This is happening in the parts of the state where the Harris campaign and Democrats need to drive up turnout among Democratic-leaning voters. So when you have polling places that are closed temporarily, that's a problem for them, and they want to make sure that those voters end up coming back, Jake.
All right, Abby Phillip with Harris Campaign. Let's go now to Caitlin Collins in West Palm Beach with the Trump campaign. What are Trump campaign aides, the top aides, going to be looking for when these polls close at the top of the hour, especially in the battleground state of Georgia?
Well, Jake, that's what they're going to be keeping their eyes on the closest, Georgia and North Carolina. That is really going to serve as basically a gut check for the Trump campaign as to maybe what kind of night they are going to have going into this. Obviously, Georgia, you know, a lot of Republicans think should be a given for Donald Trump, and he is someone who is feuded with their popular Republican governor there, Brian Kemp, who held a series of get out the vote events recently and said he will be supporting Donald Trump, but never was really explicitly endorsing him and out on the campaign trail campaigning with him. They appeared together once at a storm briefing, but that was really it, Jake, especially after Donald Trump trashed his wife. So that is going to be something Trump allies are watching to see if it has any kind of an impact, because he's a popular Republican governor. He is a very sophisticated political machine in Georgia, very impressive fundraising there. And that is all something the Trump campaign was hoping to have on their side going into tonight. So they'll be watching the vote share there very closely, as well as North Carolina, because obviously.
Okay, we lost Caitlin Collins. Let's go to David Chalian now, who has some new exit poll information from Georgia to share. David, what issues are driving Georgia voters?
Yeah, this is our first state exit poll that we're looking at of the evening, Jake, in anticipation that the polls are about to close in Georgia. And the number one issue there doesn't match where it is nationally. It's the economy far and away. 40% of Georgia voters in this election say that the economy is the most important issue. That's got to be welcome news to the Trump campaign there. 28% say democracy, 14% say abortion, immigration at 11%, 3% say foreign policy. We asked about hurricane aid and if it's getting to the people who need it. Look how evenly divided Georgia voters are on this question. 47% say yes, hurricane aid, federal hurricane aid, is getting to the people who need it. 50% say no, it's not. Who do you trust to handle a crisis? Georgia voters, slim majority, 51%, say Trump, 47% say Harris. And then Biden's job approval in Georgia stands at 41%, approve of the way President Biden is doing his job, disapprove 58%. That matches exactly what our national exit poll says of Joe Biden's approval rating as well, Jake.
All right, fascinating stuff, David Chalian. Let's go big picture for a second, Chris. How important is Georgia for the Harris campaign, for the Trump campaign?
I think it's more important for the Trump campaign than it is for the Harris campaign, just because there are other ways. There are other ways for both of them to get to 270. But you know, Georgia as a state, it was kind of a shock when Joe Biden won it in 2020. I think it was the first time since Jimmy Carter back in 1980 that a Democrat had taken the state of Georgia.
It was a shock to Donald Trump too.
Yeah, and so the idea that Georgia was even in play, most people didn't think, including me, that it was a swing state. So I think were Harris to repeat Biden's victory, that would be a big problem for Trump. Not as big a problem for Harris if Trump takes it.
Although we should note, Dan Abash, I mean, if you look at this exit poll information from Georgia, it does suggest an electorate in that one state that seems inclined to hear what Donald Trump has to say. You look at that number about who would you rather trust in a crisis, 51% Trump, 47% Kamala Harris, and then more voters in Georgia say that hurricane aid is not going to the people who need it the most. That was a message that Donald Trump was putting out there after the hurricane, that too many migrants were getting that aid from FEMA instead of the people who need it. I mean, FEMA pushed back, said that was not true, it was a lie, and still that was a Trump message.
It was, I'll just add to that, the numbers that David showed us on the economy. Huge, huge issue for people in Georgia as they go to the polls, as it has been across the board. And Georgia is really interesting to me because, first of all, you were just hearing from our reporters. I mean, right now there are bomb threats that are shutting down polling stations, threats in Georgia. That on top of the fact that residents of Georgia lived through the fight over 2020 and the misinformation that Donald Trump put into the sort of information stream like almost nobody else, maybe other than Arizona, in this country, and it was Republican versus Republican on that. And yet, you still have a slim majority saying that they trust Donald Trump more in a crisis than Kamala Harris, which makes me think, we're going to see the numbers, but makes me think what you do, which is that Georgia is looking better for Donald Trump
I
than
mean, I
Kamala
know
Harris.
it sounds like a paradox, but Georgia's the state that's the home to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Raphael Warnock. It's always had this moment, and we saw with Biden, of like, is it transitioning? Does it represent the quote unquote new South? And it has such a diversifying suburban community that I think this will be sort of an interesting election to see are Democrats on the path to doing something sustainable there.
You know, one other thing, yes, economy, the biggest issue by 40%. We tend to think that favors Trump over Harris. But democracy, 28%, abortion, 14% as the second and third issues. So cumulatively, that adds up to 42%. I mean, the issue set is not terrible for Kamala Harris in terms of what people think the most important issue is out there.
Yeah, but also one of the things that the Trump campaign has been doing in its own way is giving people who are Republicans but not a fan of Donald Trump's behavior kind of a permission structure to vote for him because of the issues that they support him on. And you really can't find a better example of that than the governor of Georgia, who Donald Trump has insulted. Donald Trump's even gone after his wife. And yet it's very clear that Governor Kemp, Brian Kemp, is supporting Trump and letting Trump use his sophisticated political machine.
I'm also glad you're bringing up this point because both campaigns have tried to look to the voter and say, it's okay, your vote is private. You may not feel so confident about this, but it's okay to vote for me.
Let's go to Aaron Burnett now, who's giving us updates from the battleground states throughout the night. Aaron.
All right, Jake, and here we are, as you can see, battleground states across the country getting ready for polls to start closing. Still lines across the country. Voting is about to end, though, in Georgia. Victor Blackwell, that's where you are, and I know you've been talking to officials there. We're getting ready for things to close, just watching some of the action behind you. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we are just minutes away from the polls closing here in Georgia, with the exception of those 10 precincts across the state where there have been extensions granted to compensate for the evacuations and the voting stop down because of those non-credible bomb threats that were called in throughout the day. 2 precincts in Cobb County, the latest they're closing at 7:20. 5 in Fulton County, the latest they're closing at 7:45. 2 here in Gwinnett County, the latest closing at 7:58. Now, those are all in the Atlanta metro area. There's also 1 precinct in Glenn County in southern Georgia near the Florida line. That will be closing at 7:35. For all other precincts across the state, voters have to be in line by 7 p.m. So as long as they are in line, they will be allowed to cast their vote. And then once the voting is done, the memory cards from the scanners will go in one vehicle, speaking specifically here in Gwinnett County, to the voters' elections office, and then the ballots will be sent in a separate vehicle. So you'll have hundreds of cars, 2 from each of the 156 precincts, in a caravan off to the office, and then they can begin to be tabulated.
A caravan, a parade of sorts. And what's so important is how transparent it is. The Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, Victor, just the other day, telling, by every 15-minute period what they expect to have come out. They just want everyone to see the transparency there. All right, as those polls get ready to close, you see Victor there in Georgia. Let's go to Pennsylvania, another battleground state. Polls getting ready to close there in just over an hour. Brian Todd is at a polling place near Pittsburgh, crucial part of the state. Brian, what are you seeing there?
Aaron, heavy voter turnout here in Washington County, just south of Pittsburgh, and you mentioned the polls closing in about a little over an hour. We're expecting a little bit of a late surge here at these precincts. 2 precincts are voting here. I have Craig Zemba here. He's a voter here in Washington County, just voted. Craig, the operative question we asked so many people, who did you vote for and why?
Donald Trump.
Okay, why?
And really comes down to just inflation, cost of living, and how things have gone in the last 4 years.
The process, do you trust the voting process? Did it go smoothly for you? There are flare-ups, that a lot of, hype and misinformation is out there. Do you trust the voting process here?
I do. I've lived here for a while, and everything's always been very smooth.
Okay. Thanks for talking to us, Craig. Good luck. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, back to you as we expect maybe a late surge here in Washington County. 1 hour left till poll closings.
We'll see if there's a surge. And again, another voter there. You see that Trump voter you're talking to talking about the economy, as we have heard from other Trump voters. Brian, thank you. And let's go over to Pamela Brown at the voting desk now. So, Pamela, first round of statewide poll closings coming. Georgia's going to be in that list here in just a few moments. What are you looking for?
Right, this is huge. Polls are closing there in just minutes, most of the polls, and then an hour after that, we're going to get those first results from this key battleground state. Georgia's Secretary of State is telling us that turnout could exceed 5 million. That's more than 70% of all active voters in the state. So clearly high interest there from voters. We're going to find out that total number sometime after the polls close. So we also know from Georgia election official Gabriel Sterling, who I've just been speaking with, that tonight's first results account counts for 75% of the overall votes. And the Secretary of State there says that he's optimistic we'll know who clinched Georgia by the end of tonight. Now, one note on Fulton County, Georgia's most populated county and home to Atlanta. We saw several non-credible bomb threats earlier today. We just heard a little bit about that from Victor Blackwell. 5 polling locations were granted a voting extension as much as 45 minutes past 7 p.m. Eastern. Once polls close, the county will have up to an hour to report early vote results, though the expectation is that most precincts will report by just about an hour from now, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be keeping a close eye on this key battleground state that Biden narrowly flipped in 2020 as results start to roll in, Aaron.
That's right. It looked one way, then it looked the other way. It was so close.
11,779.
But who was counting?
Donald Trump was when he called Brad Raffensperger.
All right, Pam, thank you very much. And I hear John King right next to me.
Yeah.
So
Pam's right.
You
Donald
chuckled?
Trump was
That's right.
counting. I was chuckling because Georgia, a little PTSD
Yeah.
over Georgia and all that. But as you see the big clock there, as Pam just said, votes will be coming in soon. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. We got some big polls closings. We'll get to those in a second. I want to look quickly at one thing we have already. The polls have not completely closed. They finished in Indiana. I just want to show you. And again, we're looking at the early results just to see if there are any clues, right? We don't want to overplay things. We also don't want to ignore things that we see, right? So you come right up here. You see one dot of blue in the middle of the Indiana map, right? That's Hamilton County. It's just north of Indianapolis. This, if you went back 20, 30 years ago, you'd see a lot of farms in this county. Now it's much more suburban, especially as you get closer to Indianapolis. Why do I raise that question? It's blue, right? 58% of the vote could flip. Look how close it is. It's 50 to 49. So it could well end up red, as it did in 2020 and 2016. But it's just, is this a signal that Kamala Harris, in the first election, post-Dobbs, in an issue where we know Donald Trump struggled in the suburbs in the 2018 midterms, struggled mightily in the suburbs in losing in 2020, is this a sign? I pointed out this way. Harris at the moment at 50, Joe Biden was at 46 in this county in 2020, and Hillary Clinton was at 37% in this county in 2016. So the suburbs are critical in key races. Indiana is most likely to stay red. Let's be very clear about that. But as you come back to 2024, again, as you look at these early results that we're getting in some states, you try to see, is it possible? We could look at some other places, look in some of the battleground states and the close-in suburbs. So something to keep an eye on as we go. A quick look at Kentucky. This one's about to close. Some more results have come in. Let's just see if it's any mass to it. Again, Kentucky is a reliably red state. We expect it to stay that way. But you will look, Scott Jennings was talking about this earlier, Fayette County is Lexington in the suburbs. The vice president was a big early lead there. Frankfort is Franklin County. It's Frankfort in the suburbs. You see it there. So let's just compare. So 54%, if you round that up, 2024 at about 42%, 48% for Joe Biden. So right now, in Indiana and in Kentucky, you see the vice president at the moment overperforming Joe Biden in some suburban areas. Now, they're in red states, so we don't know whether that's going to matter as we get into these states. But we are about to get some clues. I want to move the map a little bit. We're about to get results in Virginia. Virginia has been blue for a while, but it was purple not all that long ago. So here's the question in Virginia tonight, which is going to report results to us very quickly. Do we get a 10-point race, as we had in 2020? Do you get Democrats winning by 10? That tells you the vice president is holding the Biden map in a state that will go blue. Or do you get a 5-point race, as we had in 2016? That would tell you that Donald Trump not only is running up the score in these red rural areas, but that he's improved his standing in the suburbs a little bit. You know, you see in here, it's Northern Virginia and down around the Richmond area there. So we'll get some key clues. And then also coming up moments ago, of course, one of the biggest battlegrounds of all, as Pam Brown was just noting, 11,779 votes. That was the margin when Joe Biden flipped Georgia. The last time it had gone Democrat, Bill Clinton eked it out in 1992, thanks to Ross Perot in part there. But it's been a long time since Georgia. So as Adi noted, is it a state in transition or is it a tug-of-war state? Jake, that's what we're going to find out. Again, 11,000 votes 4 years ago. The results in battleground Georgia to come in just about any second now. And again, you look at Atlanta, you look at the suburbs, and you see all that red is Donald Trump's base coming out to vote.
All right, and we are just moments away from the first big round of poll closings. Voting's about to end in 6 states, 6 with a total of 60 electoral votes at stake. Keep an eye on the pivotal battleground of Georgia, as most voting is ending there right now. And CNN can bring you a projection now. CNN projects that Kentucky goes to Donald Trump. Donald Trump will win the Commonwealth of Kentucky with its 8 electoral votes. And CNN can also project that Vermont will go to Kamala Harris with its 3 electoral votes. Kamala Harris wins the state of Vermont. It is too early to project in Georgia, Indiana, South Carolina, and Virginia. Let's take a look at the electoral map now to see where the candidates stand. 270 electoral votes are needed to win. Donald Trump has 8. Kamala Harris has 3 electoral votes. Let's bring you a key race alert now. Indiana. Donald Trump in the lead there with 60.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 38.1% of the vote. Donald Trump has an 86,829 vote lead. That's with an estimated 13% of the vote in. Let's go to John King now at the Magic Wall. John?
And so, Jake, now we wait, right? You have the states that we've projected, Kentucky and Vermont. Those are the ones you expect. But so what are you going to get here? You see some first votes in Florida. Look at that. Let's just take it out. Okay, it's just south here. It's in Osceola County, just south of Orlando. We like to look at votes when they come in, right? Florida tends to be a reliably red state. Again, though, it'll be a test of whether Harris can improve their standing in the suburbs, or put it this way, whether Trump can improve his standings in the suburbs, whether Trump's collapse in the suburbs continues. First votes in Florida, always interesting to take a look. But what we're waiting for is the battleground just north of Florida, which will be essential in this race. Again, Vice President's easiest path is those blue wall states, but Georgia, as a competitive state, what are we looking for? All right, number one, we're looking for the Democratic Foundation, which is Fulton County. Sarah Murray noted Victor Blackwell is in the suburbs here. Some polling places will stay open, but we should get votes pretty quickly. And when you're looking at Fulton County, Atlanta is here. You see how it stretches, a lot of suburbs around it, right? We're at 0 right now. What are you looking for? You're trying to see if she can not only match the president's percentage, get 73% of the vote, but by the end of the night, sometimes this count could last into tomorrow, is the math margin, right? Because if you look here and you come out here, there are 159 counties in Georgia. A lot of them are like this. I'm just picking one randomly. They're small, they're rural, but Trump runs it up. So we're going to watch that. Is the Trump base in rural America coming out in battleground Georgia? It is absolutely essential to his math that he run it up big in places like that. But if that is the case, and that's what we expect to be the case, the Trump base comes out, then the key will be, does the Harris base come out in Fulton County, Atlanta, and then what happens here? Clayton County, just below, predominantly African-American, strong Democratic suburb. You need to run up the number, but it's not just the percentage. What's the raw math? Are Democrats coming out to vote? Democrats need high turnout to offset the Trump rural numbers. So that's one test. And then, for me, once you get further out here, let's go out where Victor Blackwell is, out here in Gwinnett County. Right, look at that. Joe Biden got 58% of the vote, Jake, right? You don't have to go back too far in history. It was just in 2012. Mitt Romney won this county. 4 years before that, John McCain won this county. This is the change in the American suburbs, right? Georgia was a red state then. But look at Romney's number. The Republican share in 2012 in this suburban area is 54%, right? That's what we're looking at tonight. How does Donald Trump fare in the suburbs, right? It goes down to 45% under Trump in 2016. He still won Georgia then at 45%, but then you come to 2020 and Trump's share drops to 40%. You cannot win in a competitive state if you are getting trounced like that in the suburbs. So can Trump get that number back up to 42, 43, 44? If he can, he's in play. If he can't, then this is the tug of war of the state. As long as Harris gets out her base, there's a flip side responsibility for her. But this, we talked a bit earlier about this. This to me, Georgia and North Carolina, demographically, they are just evenly split. They're tug of war. So we're going to see, and it's cliche. It does come down to turnout.
So, can you take me to Florida?
Sure. We got to come back to 2024. You want to see results? Okay,
I think we have 1 million votes in from Florida. About no, not 1 million. What do we have?
194,000.
194,000.
Yeah, you are. You're over 1 million.
Over 1 million votes. So this is obviously a state that we do expect ultimately is inclined to go red. Although the polls are still open there, we should know. Is there anything we can divine from where the vote has come in? Because it's more than 1 million votes have come in, and Donald Trump with a 224,000 plus lead right now.
The number one thing I would divine is we have another example, this time in a very large and very complicated state, that people have learned the lessons, built on the lessons of 2020, and that they're counting early votes and getting early votes out fast. And so that's a good thing for democracy, right?
So are these all early
red
votes?
state or blue state? I assume they are. David Challing can correct me if I'm not. Some of it could be a modest number of election day votes, but normally when you see a big batch of votes come in like that, it's early votes. So correct me if I'm wrong. So what can you glean from this? So you just want to look at big population centers. Duval County, this is one of the swing counties. Although Florida used to be a very competitive state, you would say who's winning Duval County. Right. If you want to say who's winning the governor's race or who's winning Bush versus Gore, you go to Duval County. It's not so much as a competitive state anymore, but it is a competitive county, as you see right there, 50 to 49. So you go back in time and you look, it was 51-48, right? So you could argue, we need to get the final results. You could argue, if you want, Donald Trump's a little bit more competitive this time. If that result holds, we'll see how that plays out, right? This is his home state now, but we'll see. But it's early to look at that. But that's one of the things you look at. The other thing you'll look at is, we don't really have it yet, is here, the I-4 corridor, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Orlando, over to the beach, and you see it. And then, the Democrats, again, I have no expectation the Democrats are going to win Florida, but again, you will see, are Democrats turning out? Right, are Democrats turning out? There's there's been a lot of reporting about, does Harris lose a little tiny bit of the Jewish vote because of the Israel, unhappiness over Israel-Gaza and how she has talked about that in the White House. You'll see a little bit of that down here. It's more important when you get to suburban Philadelphia and out in the Detroit area as well, around Metro. So you might get some clues out of Florida. My expectation is that Florida will stay that color, but we'll keep an eye on it. Sometimes you get surprised.
Right, and one of the other things that's interesting about trying to divine a national view of based on Florida, which is that As I recall, Governor DeSantis, who's a very conservative Republican governor, I think he won Miami-Dade when he ran for re-election. Is that not right?
We can go. I think we can look.
Do you have the governor's? I'm sorry. I shouldn't be.
No, it's all right. If you want to look, there we go.
Yeah. So
no, that's the Rubio race. We got to come to governor. Yes, he won. He won Broward.
He won. Chris won Broward.
Chris won Broward. Sorry, DeSantis won Miami-Dade.
DeSantis won Miami-Dade.
Yes.
And it was suggested that he also maybe did better than traditionally Republicans had done with the Hispanic vote, which is obviously significant. And that's one of the areas that people wonder about the vulnerabilities that Harris might have in the Latino
Absolutely.
community.
Although I would say in Florida, you have the most complicated, diverse Hispanic vote than any state in America. It's just much more diverse than in other places, which what makes it more complicated and fascinating. But it has become, you're absolutely right, that it has become, especially down here, more Republican. In other states, it was, Obama won 2/3 of the Hispanic vote, and now it's become more of a fight in some of the other battlegrounds. But here, this is why one of the reasons Florida has become reliably red is because of the Republican success there. I would also argue it's because of weak Democratic candidates, but we'll save that conversation for another day because this is what we're worried about tonight.
Indeed. David Chalian has more exit polling from north of Florida in Georgia, the battleground that we're watching right now. David, how is the vote splitting among key groups of Georgia voters?
Yeah, now that the polls have closed, Jake, we can look at some of those key demographics. So let's take a look at the African-American vote in Georgia. It's making up 30% of the electorate, according to these early exit polls. Harris obviously winning it big, 86% to 12%. But I want to note here, that 86% number, 4 years ago, Joe Biden had 88%, a tick higher of support of the African-American vote. And Trump's 12%, he is a tick higher than he was 4 years ago when that was 11%. But it's roughly the same with the black vote, what we saw here. Look at younger voters under the age of 30. Harris is winning them. They make up 18% of the electorate. Harris is winning them 60% to 39%. She is doing better with young voters in Georgia than Joe Biden was doing against Trump 4 years ago. Trump got 43% of the youth vote in Georgia 4 years ago. He's down to 39% now, so that'll be something to watch. And then non-college white voters. This is obviously Trump's base. 32%, roughly a third of the Georgia electorate, are white, non-college educated voters. Trump's winning 81% of them. That is a bit better than he was doing 4 years ago, though 4 years ago, it was 35% of the electorate. So as a share of the overall electorate, it's come down. Harris is winning 18% of them, a tick under where Biden was 4 years ago. This will be the story of these exit polls in Georgia. Independent voters, they make up 31% of the electorate. That is a slightly larger share than what they made up 4 years ago. Trump is winning them by 11 points in these early exit poll results, 54% to 30%. Jake, 4 years ago, Joe Biden won independent voters in Georgia when he won the state by 9 points. So we've seen a swing of 20 points towards Trump in terms of the margin, from 9-point advantage 4 years ago with independents for Biden to now an 11-point advantage with independents for Trump in Georgia, Jake.
Wow, David Chalian. And Dana, that is really significant. We see some incremental changes here and there when it comes to young voters. She's doing slightly better. Non-college whites, he's doing slightly better. But that independent swing is wild.
It's a huge swing. And I just want to underscore what David said. It is a bigger percentage of the vote share. Last time around, it was 28% independents. I made up 28% of the Georgia vote, and now it is 30%. And, I was right, 31%. And it is a total flip. It's a complete flip. Donald Trump is doing so much better with independents than Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden kind of ran away with independents 4 years ago, and of course he won the state.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why, what the reason is that there would be this dramatic flip of double digits in independents, and I am something you don't often hear in election coverage. It's something of a loss as to how you explain that independents would have gone so much more for Trump this time than they did for Biden last time.
Audie, hang on, we're going to go over to Jake for a projection.
And we can bring you another CNN projection. CNN projects that Indiana will go to Donald Trump. Indiana, with its 11 electoral votes, will go to Donald Trump. Let's look at the electoral map now to see where the candidates stack up. Remember, 270 needed to win. Donald Trump has 19 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 3 electoral votes. They both still have a lot of electoral votes to get up to 270. Let's do a key race alert for you now. In Florida, Donald Trump is in the lead with 51.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 47.7% of the vote. Donald Trump has a 138,912 vote lead. I'm sorry, that just went up, a 224,914 vote lead. The votes are coming in as I do this. That's with more than a third, 35% of the estimated vote in from Florida, with its big fat packet of 30 electoral votes. The Commonwealth of Virginia, slightly more competitive. Donald Trump in the lead right now with 58.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 40.6% of the vote. That's only with a handful of votes in as of right now, about 1,500 votes. As we stand by for results from the crucial state of Georgia, we are counting down to the end of voting in the battleground state of North Carolina. This historic election night is just getting started. Stay with us.